Hi, I'm Harry Cohen.
Hi, I'm Connie Fontaine.
Welcome to the Be the Sun, Not the Salt podcast, where we talk about heliotropic living. Today's guest is Kristi VandenBosch, president of the Oliver Advertising Agency in New York City. And Kristi's going to tell some amazing stories about how she applies these concepts in her own life and how they can help all of us.
Kristi was an amazing storyteller. I think that's what made her such a fun guest. She really knows who she is and why she's on this planet. And she tells us some great stories about how she knows how to show up and show up the right way. And I was inspired to think about how I could maybe do things differently.
I was as well. And I was also blown away by the story that she told. She did some research on the heliotropic effect. And I will never forget what she said in terms of how older sunflowers react differently than young sunflowers. And
Don't give away the punchline.
I will not. So let's let our listeners hear more. Without further ado, welcome Kristi VandenBosch. I'm thrilled to be doing this, Kristi. I'm thrilled to be doing this because A, I'm excited about what we're doing with this podcast and the impact that I hope we make. And B, that we're doing it with you, an already uplifting, delightful, heliotropic person from the moment I met you, I don't know, 25 years ago. Connie,
At least.
Meet Kristi VandenBosch, the president of Oliver Ad Agency and a marketing wizard like yourself. And Connie, do you want to introduce yourself, Kristi?
Yeah. I mean, we have so many people that we intersect with, Kristi, and I'm just thrilled to have you part of this. And I think already just in the first beginning of our introductions, we know what a great storyteller you are. So we're really happy to have you today.
I can tap dance for ages if you ask me to.
I love it. We love that.
Totally. So we started this podcast with the intention of influencing people's lives through the simple stories of people who we already know are heliotropic. They're already good people. They want to try and be better people. And they found Be the Sun, Not the Salt helpful to them in some way, shape, or form. And I can't wait to hear more of how you found it helpful so that the listeners would do one of two things. Let's say, you know what? I want to be more kind, more uplifting, more heliotropic, like that person is. Or I'm going to go buy that book or listen to the next podcast. And we nudge the
I've
world.
sold a lot of books for you this week, by the way. I swear I have.
Oh, good.
I deal with people around the world, and there's probably a good half dozen or so women that I actually mentor, and they're all different stages in their career. So there's very juniors all the way up to people who are COOs of associated companies. And they have often like the same kinds of questions. And where the question comes from, I know because it's a historical sort of trope that we as women, particularly in business, have to deal with. But I bring them a bunch of thoughts from this book, including when they ask me the question, like, I think I'm too empathetic and I'm not going to be able to reach the C-suite because I'm too empathetic. I'm like, oh, baby, whoever told you that, and I know who told you that, it was wrong. So let me give you some lessons. And I pull out the book and I read to them. And it's really like, it's adorable. It's very Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Isn't it fun that it's applicable to people at all levels? That's great.
I've got a couple. So the company that I run actually has teams that are embedded inside our client's business. And so every single team has its own personality and its own culture. Like we try to bring something very important from the center for them to hang on to, but they're also very much expected to adopt a client's culture. And some client cultures are good and some are hard. And I've got a couple that are especially hard right now. And I did the same thing with them today. I read them some stories from the books because they're having a hard time reacting with positivity to the input that they're getting on their side, which is very hard and sometimes very negative. And like the things that they can do and the choices they can make to not react in a way that this intention is meant to provoke. And so I'm laying down the lessons for them.
Tell us about one of those lessons.
I mean, they're all good ones. I told them a story today. I like to tell them, this is, by the way, this is what getting old is. And this is what wisdom is. I've come to realize it's just having really good stories to tell.
Totally.
And so I was giving them the one today. And again, I kind of like drew from one of the stories in the book. And I said, I've come to realize, and I think there's a line, Harry, that you use in the book, and let me actually find it because I wrote it down because I wanted to actually reference it, which is remember who you are.
Yep.
And as I've actually gotten to this point in time in my life, I actually realize I know why I'm here, which is just a variant on that. Like I know what I'm here to do. And so I was explaining to the children on the phone who are all fully formed adults, I know why I'm here, and it's to walk into the middle of things that need help. And so if you guys have a thing that you need help with today and you need me to walk into the middle of it, even if it's small and you're having a thing with another colleague or a client or whatever, like I can help you. And let me give you an example. And so when I moved into this neighborhood, on the opposite corner of the block from me is what used to be a diner. And there are two of them in this neighborhood, and they were owned by two Greek brothers, older guys, and both of them died during COVID.
No.
So the one on my block, his son, who was a restaurant lawyer, took over the property and he completely renovated and he turned it into this gorgeous restaurant. It's the wrong block for a gorgeous restaurant. And so it kind of was a bit of a struggle. And it was his first day of opening. And I'd seen it, and like they put a little coffee bar on the front. I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and get coffee the first day. I'm going to be like a patron. I'm excited about this. And I go around the corner. It's like 8:30 in the morning. And I have to wait because there's a flag person standing at the corner with a stop sign because someone has a crane and they're actually putting a piece of like heavy equipment onto the roof of the building on the corner. So I wait. And then I go down the sidewalk and I go in, and there's the barista, and I'm the only person in the restaurant. I'm like, need 2 coffees. And he's making them. And all of a sudden behind me, a fight breaks out, like a screaming fight. And I didn't even know there was anybody else in the restaurant. So I was already startled. I turned around, and it's the guy who is now the owner of the restaurant, the son. And I recognize him, but he and I don't know each other. We've never met. And this woman, and apparently the woman is the owner of the crane company that was putting the equipment on the roofs. And so apparently what had happened, because it was raining that morning as well, is the flag person on the other end of the block, on his end of the block, had stood under his awning with a stop sign in front of her, waiting for the rain to stop in front of his door. And so he was trying to explain to the girl with the stop sign that she could not stand in front of his door with a stop sign in the morning he was opening. And apparently it got a little bit heated that time. And so she called her boss, who's the lady who owned the crane company. If you can imagine a woman who owns a New York crane company, they're screaming. And the barista and I are just like, what is going on? And he reaches over, and there's a picture of his dad on the windowsill. And he's still yelling at her. He's like, this is my dad's restaurant. This meant everything to him. And it was like, I know why I'm here.
Yeah.
And I walked in between them and I put my arms around him. And I said, this must be such a hard day for you. Like, I know your father would be so proud of what you've done.
Yeah.
And he starts bawling. And he just holds on to me for the longest time. And I can't yell anymore. Like, you cannot yell into this void. You cannot yell into it. And we stood there for like forever. And eventually he sort of calms down. And I turned to her and I say, this is a really hard day for him. You need to be kind. And I turned around and I took my coffees and I walked out.
Yeah.
Every single time I have been to that restaurant since then, no matter who is around, and he's always around, he tells that story to them. Like it was a meaningful moment to both of us.
Yeah. Does he give you a hug back?
Oh my God, we held on to each other like we were dying. We clung to each other.
Yes. That will last forever. Yeah.
It'll last forever. And it also identifies, people often ask, what's your favorite chapter? It's like asking, what is your favorite kid? But it is, who are you? There's a chapter, who are you? Remember, if you know who you are, just these are you, Kristi, you're the person.
You know what to do.
You know what to do. If you know who you are, you go, I know what to do. If I know I'm a good person, or in your case, I get in the middle of complex things and de-escalate them and bring out the best. It's so refreshing. I love that you're able to take something as simple as that and use it. What I get excited about is not that you, Kristi, an accomplished, wonderful, incredibly impassioned, passionate, successful woman executive can use it, but that you can pass it on to others, and that these young people can absorb it and metabolize it and use it and run faster and jump higher because of your mentorship.
And I remind them, like, they aren't going to know who they are for a while. And to expect it sort of early in your life and career is a lot to ask of yourself. You won't feel comfortable doing what I do, stepping into the middle of things. It took me decades to get to the point where that is the thing I realized I was supposed to do. But
you're actually doing it.
It'll be something different.
Yeah. You probably knew all along that you were that kind of person, but to do it and have that confidence to do it. Did you get a reaction from the woman, the screaming woman in that scenario?
I don't know. I walked out the door. I'm going to guess yes, because it de-escalated in that moment, and I can only hope so.
I hope so too. I'm glad you walked into that. I'm glad you did.
Well, I mean, this is who you are. This is what you do, Kristi. You said you had several more. I'd love to hear the ones that you had thought about, and I want to hear them.
I've got an example of like instant karma, which is one of my favorites.
Please.
And then something that again is like a small gesture but felt good. And sometimes I feel like these are self-serving stories, and I hope they don't come off that way in any way.
Mhm.
But if and again, this is what I'm here to do. So I go to the theater a lot, and I always go to the theater by myself. And I do it. I will buy a ticket at the last minute. I will buy the best ticket I can, because that's one of the great joys of living in New York, is you can do that. So on a Wednesday, randomly, I bought a ticket to watch Bryan Cranston in Network, which is, I remember the film from my kind of like 70s era childhood,
It is.
but I didn't remember that it was a tragedy, which is not an important part of the story. But
It is.
I go and I'm in the second row center because, again, I buy the best seat that I can. And so I get there a little bit early, and the set is fantastic for this film. And it's about a newsroom. And for those of you who are not familiar with the film, basically a newscaster, a famous newscaster, has kind of a psychic break, but his psychosis becomes so popular amongst the broader populace that they tune into him, and they won't deal with the guy's mental illness because he's now become such a popular figure, and
Mhm.
ends with all the tragedy. You can imagine that story ending. Anyway, so the set is a newsroom, and there's like cameras on there, and there's like screens. It's a really innovative set. It's really super cool. So I'm second row center, and there's a guy next to me and his wife, and behind them is a man and his elderly father. So the theater's just filling up. And because it's a newsroom, there's actually a clock on the wall. It's like a countdown clock to the start of the
Mhm.
newscast, but it's the countdown clock to the start of the play. So the woman who's next to the guy who's next to me, she props up her seat, because sometimes you're so close to the edge of the stage, like you're almost looking over the edge of the stage. And so she props up her seat, and she flips down on top of it. And immediately the guy behind her husband taps her and says, "You can't sit like that. My father can't see." World War III breaks out. Like, it breaks out instantly. Like, everyone's on their feet and they are screaming at each other. And forgive me for using profanity in your podcast, but it's like, "Fuck you, no, fuck you. You're so," literally screaming in a theater. And I'm watching the clock, and it's like 8 minutes to showtime. And I'm seeing this thing unfold in front of me. And again, like, the moment comes, like, I'm supposed to get in the middle of this, but not in the way that you like tell people to stop the thing that they're doing.
Right.
I actually reached through them, and I grabbed the old man's hand, and I said, "Did you have a chance to have dinner in the neighborhood before the show? And tell me where you were, and was it good?" And you, again, it's like you can't yell over the thing that's happening in the middle of the antagonism you're trying to continue. And he talks to me a little bit, and this thing just like sort of settles down. And now it's like a minute to showtime, and everyone's still disgruntled, but everyone sits down in their seats. And the guy next to me looks at me. He's like, "Do you know those people?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "Are they always that rude?" I said, "Never. This is an absolute anomaly. And I hope you have a great show." Three,
Mhm.
2, 1, the play starts.
Thank goodness.
Fast forward, because this is not the end. This is the instant karma part.
Uh-oh.
It's about I don't know, somewhere in the middle of the third act. And Bryan Cranston breaks the fourth wall. He sits down on the edge of the stage, and he's talking. He's kind of at the other edge of the stage from where I am.
Mhm.
And he's talking to the audience. And he sort of hops off, and he gets into the aisle, and then he starts to like work his way down a row. It turns out he works his way down the row that I'm sitting in. And then he sits down on the arm of my seat, and the cameras that are on stage are now pointing at me and Bryan Cranston. And
Mhm.
they're projected on the back wall of the theater, 30 feet high. And we do an entire bit, Bryan Cranston and I. And then he continues on and goes back on stage, and the play continues to tragic end. But it was like, that was such an incredible instant gift that I was given
Mm.
just for doing something that was a good thing I should have done anyway. And it was just like, again, the instant karma moment.
Or Brian Cranston just thought you were super cute. That's one or the other.
I thought he and I might get married afterward, but apparently he's already busy.
So guys, this is about, doing all the good you can. This is chapter 1, do all the good you can in all the ways you can. And Kristi, what I love is that, you said earlier, this is who you are. You want to try and bring some light and some goodness in the midst of disarray, and you did it in the diner and you did it in the theater, and it's you do in your work with people with difficult clients. And I love that it's as simple as that. Now I'm wondering if listeners are going, "I'm not a unicorn like that. I'm not going to do what Kristi did." Well, of course not. Very few people would, but people
Mhm.
can take that story and do their own version of, can I de-escalate between these two? Can I do some good between the mess that's occurring? Can I do anything that would help out this situation? And if the answer is yes, then do it. I hope that the listeners hear this and don't
Mhm.
think, "Oh, I could never do that." Well, what could you do? 'Cause that's
Well,
the instant
the
trial.
unique way that Christy's talking about it is easier for people to do than normally people worry about getting in the middle. She doesn't get in the middle. She distracts. It's to
Yeah.
de-escalate it by not pointing at the thing that's going on, but to point to something else. And I think that's what I learned from that story is I can see myself trying to de-escalate, but that version is unique, I think.
But her motive is clear and
Yeah,
clean,
and clean. Yep.
and she wants to do good. And so my interpretation is the karma comes back to you because you were trying to do some good and they could feel it. They could feel that you
Mm,
were really not trying to be right or trying to give a teaching or be the guru. You were just
yeah.
being loving.
I think
So
a lot of
What?
people are genuinely ashamed at their
yeah,
bad behavior.
yeah,
But
Mhm,
once it starts, it's so hard to de-escalate, especially if the other person that you are confronting is not
mhm.
in any de-escalation mode.
Right.
And there's such a lovely little lesson in the book about just how to be helpful. And if it's helpful to again step into the middle of thing
Mhm,
and give them permission to de-escalate, even if it's just
mhm.
to distract them for the minute it takes for them to like
Yeah,
get control of themselves again and make the
yeah.
decision to like not be a dick.
I mean, Christy, that's the whole point of trying to be helpful is well, what will work? What will make it a win-win? What will make it better for everybody? And if you can do it, do it. And what I love is that you're able to you do, B you teach others to do. And I hope that this little podcast makes it into people's hearts and minds to say, I could do that a smidgen more, just a hair more. One of the things that I struggle with, and I'd love your opinion, is I often think, isn't this obvious? Didn't you already know this, Christy? You're doing this your whole life. How how is this? How does it make it more better, or if it does?
I think there's something that comes from yes, keep using the term like getting older, but there is something
Yeah,
about getting older in which the decisions you make when you're younger are fraught with a lot of other noise in your head about like
yeah,
what the repercussion will be. And I'll go back a lot to the subject of women in business. The Are you being too loud? Are you being too pushy? Are you getting involved in something you shouldn't get involved in? Are you allowed to have an opinion in this room? Should you actually have a voice at this table? It's the things that the juniors struggle with all the time. And there is something about just the time going by and the confidence you get with time going by that it's so much easier to make the decision to do the right thing. You
mm,
know you have a right to be at the table, and you know you have a right to say those things. In fact, you're compelled to.
mm. I wonder if we could speed. I know how right you are, just in terms of our own getting older, wisdom, maturity thing. I'd love to speed up the maturity process for young
Mhm.
people so that we could get them to feel and understand what you just said sooner rather than a decade's worth. Now, maybe they need a decade or two, but let's see if we can help them, maybe three, but let's see if we can help them, Christy, just like you do. So we get them so that they feel and see that their voice matters. They're allowed to feel, they're allowed to think, they're allowed to be wrong, all that stuff, you know?
I feel the example setting is a really important thing that we do. And again, I want people who are in our company to feel, and just generally to feel like if they see me doing something that they should feel like that is an example I'm setting on purpose for them. And I'm actually teaching them something, even if it's just through observation. And I have to spend a lot of time. And I coach people of all sorts of different levels and different capabilities and different ambitions. And it's always an interesting thing to see what people react to and what they respond to. And I'll tell you the other story that I meant to tell. And this is again a little bit of a coaching thing, but of a total stranger. So I'm walking home one night, and this in New York, literally just like all these magical things unfold before you. Like every night, no matter what it is, something magical unfolds before you. And I'm on this sort of quiet street in Soho walking back to my house. And I can hear a very loud argument happening at the other end of the block that I'm walking down, but it's only the one side. So someone's clearly on a phone. And it's a woman, young woman, and she's sitting on one of the kind of curbside things. And she's clearly having a fight with a partner. And it's just like, it's loud and it's screaming. And I'm getting closer and closer and closer to her. And I'm 10 feet away and she hangs up the phone and her head is just like down. And I stop and I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, no. And she immediately just unloaded everything that had just happened on her call. He never supports me. He always calls me when I'm at work. He knows I'm at work. He knows now I'm going to be super upset about all this stuff. I'm going to have to go in there and I'm
This
going to
is
look like hell and my face is going to be red. And so like, I got my arm around her. I'm like, nobody gets to do that to you. That is gaslighting. No one gets to actually call you while you're at your place of work when you need to be at your best and they know you need to be at your best. Like do we need to take a walk around the block? We can take a walk around the block. But if we don't, we're going to stand here and we're going to get our shit together and we're going to walk back into that job and we're going to be the very best we that we can be. And she's like, okay. And then I just walked on. And we probably spent a good 20 minutes together, but it's again, these weird moments that unfold before you that you realize you have a compulsion or a reason that you should act in that second.
Kristi, did you learn that from somebody?
I
Did
don't
somebody
think so.
teach
Maybe
you? Did
Harry.
you
Maybe
observe
Harry.
it?
No, Kristi, that
I think you've been doing this for longer.
I think you
Yeah.
have. I mean, I like what you said more than you can possibly know, because that is karma. There's a Sanskrit word dharma, which is righteous duty, which is do what is right. Do the next right thing. When you see an opportunity to help somebody out, help them out. Now, jumping on the opportunity to help them out, whether it's helping a little old lady with their luggage in the plane, which I just learned after 3 million miles on Delta, or when you see what you just described and you put your arm around her, I mean, I get chills with there's opportunities like that all over the place. If we all, and I'm putting myself right in, had the courage to say, I can do that. I'm going to do that more. I already do it. I'm going to do it even more. Let me just tell you something. I always want to find one thing from these podcasts that I will take and use forever. This one I will. I'm going to look for those opportunities to do that more than I already do. We're not overstepping. We're not being boundary intrusive. You're being absolutely loving and kind and helpful. Just one more thing, then I'll stop talking. My friend Bobby, there's a dear older woman who lived down the street from him, and she was infirm, and he said, some neighbor should really take her some meals. He thought, well, wait a minute, I'm a neighbor.
Oh,
Yeah. That's
Which-
Bobby.
It's right. And so the point of our story is to wait a minute. I can do something good right now, right here. If I'm paying attention, my motive is clear and clean. I'm trying to do the right thing. And the story is beautiful. All three of those are beautiful. They're not unicorn Kristi stories. I think they're for us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thank you, girl.
the least I can do. I get to be here, like generally here.
I thought it was a really good question. Did you learn it from somewhere? Did you get it from someone as you were growing up? How did it start?
I honestly don't know. I should have a good answer to that
Interesting.
question, and I don't.
No, not
And
necessarily.
again, I don't think it's necessarily being born with one particular skill set, except maybe, again, a little bit of an overactive empathy gland. But to channel that in the right place is good.
So I just learned something recently, the difference in empathy and compassion. You'd think I'd know this. Empathy is I feel someone's pain and suffering. Compassion is I want to relieve it. I want to do something about it. It's like the next level. Empathy is good, but compassion is better. What you just demonstrated is empathy and compassion, which is I want to try and do something about this, which again, for our listeners and for me, I want to be more compassionate. I'm already empathetic. Great. So more compassion means can I do some good? Can I stick my nose into a situation and make it better, be helpful? So to Connie's question, even if we didn't learn it from parents, we can look at role models and see people who are really good at this. You're good at this. And
Well, the nudge, that's what this podcast is about, right? It's the gentle nudges. It's what the book's about. It's not about we were born with it. And that's why I was curious. Sometimes we hear, my grandma always did this. My dad always did this. But sometimes it's just, I don't know. I don't know why. I get something out of it.
I think I learn more from people who don't naturally do it. And I feel the pain in the room, like, again, maybe just the unnatural empathy gland, but I feel the pain that gets communicated. And again, I watch so many people and I've spent my entire career in advertising. So I've been on more panels about women in advertising than I care to ever communicate. But there's so much to watch in when we adopt bad behaviors because we think those are right behaviors to have. And this is a little bit of a business thing versus the broader, like how to be a human in the world. When our role models set bad examples and we believe that to be successful is to be aggressive or hard or non-compassionate or whatever that trait that is often a very masculine sort of historical trait is. And when that gets teed up for especially young women coming up in the business as the reason that they'll never be successful or the reason they'll never hit the C-suite is because they don't have enough of these bad things and too many of the good things, which they will be characterized as weak and soft and ineffective and like not leadership traits. Those are things that I need to remind them that if I happen to, for example, cry on a call, and I won't be the first person who's cried on a call, I will not be the last person to cry on a call. Like, that doesn't make me a bad leader. And that is, again, I want to set the good example for them about that.
And that is a good example. I didn't have enough leaders
and
like
the
you that I
ability
worked
to
with.
show our emotions and be really comfortable with our emotions and be very courageous about what we feel, all of our feelings. Just love that you're saying that, demonstrating that, revealing that. Thank you for doing that. Somebody asked me, I was actually filling out a questionnaire, and I was reminded I was listening to a group of people talk about their vision for Be the Sun, and I started to weep. And
Oh,
I wept out of sheer sort of, I don't know, a combination of
relief, joy.
joy, and my life is done.
Gratitude. Yeah.
Gratitude, and my life is done. Okay, if that's their vision, I did some good in this world. But the tears came. Well, I thought, well, I don't care if anybody sees me crying, but I'm crying. To your
Mhm.
point,
There's
um,
so much relief
yeah,
that
Mhm.
something will make a difference.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So,
I have another, this is a small aside, except it'll wind up being a big diatribe. I think about current times, the grievance culture and people being so upset by the things they're being told to be upset by, so that they don't actually pay attention to the things that are keeping them from a place of goodness and happiness and
Mhm.
being a productive member of society that moves things forward in a better way, because that grievance is being stoked. And that as a force in the world that is still a good versus evil thing, I'm so hyper aware of. And I never realized how much I would have to do to work on that every single day. And that
mhm,
microcosm example of the women in my company who believe they will not be successful because their traits are good and kind and empathetic and yeah, compassionate and human, have been told by people in power that those are not the things that you need to be successful.
Right.
So I need them to know that thing that they've been told is not the truth. That is the system talking to them and keeping them distracted so that they don't ever challenge that power.
mhm. So I happen to work for a woman, Mindy Holman, who wrote the foreword to Be the
Oh, I thought you
Sun.
were going to say me.
Yeah. And you.
But
Okay.
I do bossing
Connie,
around a
I
lot.
work for you. I work for you too. I work for you
I
too.
know. We work for each other. I'm
But you
teasing
would
you.
agree. I know, but you would agree that Mindy represents that. And it's very
Oh.
powerful for me to
Mhm.
know, because of the leader of this company represents the values that you just articulated. I know um, that she wants the best for and from every single employee and their family members, to her in her bones. And any scintilla of unkindness and disrespect and nastiness is
It's
just
unacceptable. Yeah.
unacceptable, period, full stop.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's really, well, it's encouraging. And no margin, no mission. She's driven to make the company successful for generations to come. So it's not just a do-gooder mindset. It's
Mhm.
very, very practical. But Connie, you know this, and
Yeah.
to your point, it takes role models for us to be
Mhm.
inspired by. And so thank you for being one, Kristi. And we hope to engender more from this podcast. And Connie, you want anything?
No, I think one of the other things about Mindy is, she continues to be curious about it because she'll be the first person to say, I come from a position of, you know, power. I come from a position of privilege. And so I know I don't know what that feels like. Tell me more. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things I love about her is she not only expects it from others, but she continues to ask, okay, what can we be doing differently? What can we be doing more of? So yeah, she's a true hero in my eyes.
And I want to be that. I want to be a leader,
Yep.
a
Yep.
person that people look at and feel what you were describing, Kristi, that he is curious. He is kind. He is respectful. He is compassionate. He makes me want to be a better person, period. And
Well, and
that's,
like Christy, walk into where you can be helpful.
yeah,
And I've got this real, after you said that a couple of times, Christy, that's what's stuck in my mind is I will gently walk in and I will
yeah,
distract. I think that really impressed upon me of how I can better serve others when that situation arises.
yep. Can we
Yep.
make this situation better? I think there's a
It's
little
so
chapter.
kind. It's such a
Yeah,
kind, gentle way to be
yeah,
part of a conflict. And I think it's a real interesting perspective and it's going to nudge people that are listening to think a little differently And
Yep.
instead of criticizing somebody or pointing a finger at somebody misbehaving, it's maybe look over here. I've got a different way to distract. So I love that.
Beautiful. So if this is, I think about this, if this is our first or last podcast we're ever going to do, and we want to leave the world a better place. This is our mission. This is the last thing we're ever going to do. And we'll get to do a few more, but let's imagine this is our last thing we're ever going to do. Is there anything for the millions, there's billions of people in the world, but the millions of people that are going to hear this podcast and they're going to listen to you, Kristi, give them advice, give them counsel, give them something that they'll say, now that you got to hear. Sorry for that lead in.
If I could know, I wish I'd actually prepared better for this. But I would say it actually is rooted in the idea that the badness you see around you is not a condition you have to accept, and that you have power in all kinds of different ways to address it. And it could be, again, as simple as the gentle distraction or the direct taking on of an issue that you know is important. And it is not okay to sit back and let the bad continue. You are compelled as a person with goodness in your soul to walk into that situation, to know why you're there, and to know that you have the power to actually stop something from happening. And there's no alternative.
I'm glad you didn't prepare.
Yeah.
Honestly, because, when we talk about be the sun, not the salt, not the salt is as important as be the sun. And when you just said that, it's when you see salty or disrespectful, unkind behavior or badness or evil in the world, the way you just articulated, it's not cool. It's not cool from me. It's not cool from you. It's not cool from anybody. And what you just said is, I have an obligation to do something about that.
Yeah. I have a question because it sounds to me, Kristi, like you felt like you always knew how to be good. What happened when you heard the concept about heliotropic leadership? Did it change anything for you?
There was something lovely in the thought of it, and I learned something about it because I, of course, had to look it up.
Yeah.
The notion, and I looked up sunflowers specifically,
Yeah.
and sunflowers, of course, follow the sun throughout the
Mhm.
course of the day, and they end in the morning they're facing east, and at the end of the day they're facing west. During the course of the night, they reset themselves, and so when the sun comes up in the morning, they're facing east. Young sunflowers will do that, whereas old sunflowers will just stay facing east. And I thought there was such an interesting
know.
notion of what happens as you get older and become more confident that you always are going to face the sun that way, and you're always ready for it.
I did not know that
There's a lot
one.
of it.
That's a good
Dude.
one.
Dude,
Gotta go on the
Thank
you.
website, Harry. That's a
Thank you.
doozy.
that's an unbelievable one. It's such a beautiful metaphor. Talk about the metaphor
Isn't it?
itself. As we get older, we learn, no, we don't have to turn. Let's just stay in the light. Seriously.
It's going to come up every morning. We got to be
Yeah.
ready for it.
Oh man, Kristi, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Imagine how many people we're going to make better. We're going to help. Just think about
Well,
it.
we're going to make us better, aren't we? I mean, I
One
feel
at a
like that's
time.
one of the things we talk about is every guest brings us something else that nudges us. And it's why we continue to do what we're doing.
Kristi, the next time I see you, I'm going to tell you a story of when I stepped in and did one of those Kristi moves. Seriously.
I don't have them branded, so it could be actually a Harry move.
Oh,
but I would
we
love
just
to hear it.
branded it. We just branded it. Apparently. I'm going to pull a Kristi.
To pull it, Kristi. Nicely done, Connie. You're in that meeting. You did a beautiful Kristi. You did.
That's right. And every time I walk into a theater now in New York, I'm going to think of you first.
Really?
I'm going to look around like,
Such
does
a
anyone
great
need my
one.
help? Yeah.
Really? Thank you so much, Kristi.
It's a delight.
At Be the Sun, Not the Salt, our mission is to spread this message and make the world a better place. In our podcast, we hope to share stories that nudge each one of us to be our best self. If you heard something today that nudged you, inspired you, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at stories@bethesunnotthesalt.com. And who knows, we may feature you on an upcoming episode.